The gunshot wound in the cowboy's shoulder was still bleeding when they dragged him through the door of Dr. Harrington's office, and Lila Whitmore knew immediately that this was going to be one of those nights where sleep would have to wait until dawn. It was August 1882 in San Pedro, California, and the heat of the day still lingered in the examination room despite the late hour, making the air thick and heavy as she rushed to prepare the instruments while Dr. Harrington barked orders at the two ranch hands who had brought the injured man in. "Get him on the table carefully now," she instructed, her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. The cowboy groaned as they lifted him, his face pale beneath several days' worth of stubble and road dust. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandage someone had tied around his shoulder, dripping steadily onto the floor as they maneuvered him onto the examination table. Dr. Harrington hurried into the room, his spectacles sliding down his nose as he assessed the situation. "Lila, I need hot water, clean bandages, and the surgical kit. Quickly now." She was already moving, her hands swift and efficient from 3 years of working alongside the only doctor in San Pedro. The town was small but bustling, situated near the harbor where ships came and went with regularity, bringing sailors, merchants, and occasionally trouble. Cowboys from the surrounding ranches would ride in for supplies or entertainment, and injuries were common enough that Lila had seen her fair share of bullet wounds, broken bones, and various other ailments that came with life in this rough corner of California. As she returned with the supplies, she got her first real look at the patient. He was younger than she had initially thought, probably not much older than her own 22 years. His dark hair was matted with sweat, and his jaw was clenched against the pain, but there was something striking about his features even in distress. His eyes, when they flickered open briefly, were an unusual shade of gray-green that reminded her of the ocean during a storm. "What happened?" Dr. Harrington asked the ranch hands as he began cutting away the bloody shirt. "Bar fight got out of hand," one of them answered, a stocky man with a thick mustache. "Vincent Quad here was just defending himself when someone pulled a gun. Bullet went clean through, we think, but he has been bleeding bad for the past hour while we rode into town. Vincent." The name suited him somehow. Lila found herself watching his face as Dr. Harrington probed the wound, noting the way his jaw tightened but no sound escaped his lips. Tough, she thought, or perhaps too stubborn to show weakness in front of others. "Miss Whitmore, I will need your assistance," Dr. Harrington said, pulling her attention back to the task at hand. "You two can wait outside." The ranch hands looked relieved to be dismissed, backing out of the room quickly. Lila moved to the opposite side of the table, meeting Dr. Harrington's eyes across their patient's body. She had assisted with dozens of procedures by now, but each one still carried a weight of responsibility that settled heavy on her shoulders. "The bullet did go through," Dr. Harrington confirmed after his examination. "That is fortunate. But there is significant muscle damage, and I need to clean the wound thoroughly to prevent infection. Hold him steady." Lila placed her hands on Vincent's good shoulder and hip, applying gentle but firm pressure. His eyes opened fully then, focusing on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Up close, she could see flecks of gold in those storm-colored eyes, and despite the pain he must be feeling, there was a sharp intelligence in his gaze. "This is going to hurt," Dr. Harrington warned, reaching for the bottle of carbolic acid solution they used for cleaning wounds. "Cannot hurt worse than getting shot," Vincent managed, his voice rough but steady. His eyes never left Lila's face. "Though I have to say, the view has improved considerably since I woke up." Even through his pain, he was flirting. Lila felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the warm night air. Try to stay still, she said, keeping her voice professional even as something fluttered in her chest. Dr. Harrington began cleaning the wound, and despite his bravado, Vincent's body went rigid beneath her hands. His breathing came in short, controlled bursts, and sweat beaded on his forehead. But he kept his eyes on Lila's face, as if drawing some kind of strength from her presence. "What is your name?" he asked through gritted teeth. "Lila Whitmore," she answered, using one hand to wipe the sweat from his brow with a cool cloth. "I am Dr. Harrington's assistant." "Lucky Dr. Harrington," Vincent said, then gasped as the doctor probed deeper into the wound. His hand shot out, gripping Lila's arm with surprising strength. "Sorry," he muttered, but he did not let go. "It is all right," she said softly, placing her free hand over his. His palm was calloused and rough, the hand of someone who worked hard for a living, but his grip on her arm was surprisingly gentle despite the pain he was enduring. "You are doing well." They worked for another 30 minutes, cleaning and stitching both the entry and exit wounds. Throughout it all, Vincent maintained that strange connection with Lila, his eyes finding hers whenever the pain grew too intense, his hand occasionally reaching for her arm or hand. She found herself responding instinctively, offering quiet words of encouragement, cooling his face with damp cloths, and providing whatever comfort she could while assisting Dr. Harrington with the medical necessities. By the time they finished bandaging the shoulder, Vincent's face had taken on a grayish tinge, and his eyes were glazed with exhaustion and pain. Dr. Harrington stepped back, wiping his hands on a clean towel. "You will need to stay in town for at least a week," he told Vincent firmly. "That shoulder needs time to heal, and you cannot be riding or doing ranch work. I will need to change the bandages daily and monitor for infection." "I do not have money for a hotel," Vincent said, his voice weaker now. "I can sleep in the stable, or we have a recovery room in the back," Lila interjected, surprising herself with the offer. Dr. Harrington shot her a questioning look, but she continued. "It is just a small room with a cot, but patients have used it before when they needed to stay close for monitoring." Dr. Harrington nodded slowly. "That would be acceptable, provided you follow my instructions exactly. No getting up except to use the facilities. You will eat what Miss Whitmore brings you, take the medicine I prescribe, and rest. If you develop a fever or the wound shows signs of infection, you must tell us immediately." "Yes, sir," Vincent agreed, clearly too exhausted to argue. They moved him to the back room, a modest space with whitewashed walls, a narrow cot, a small table, and a single window that looked out onto the alley behind the office. Lila brought clean sheets and a pillow, helping to settle Vincent as comfortably as possible. He was asleep almost before his head touched the pillow, his features finally relaxing in unconsciousness. She stood there for a moment, watching him sleep. In repose, he looked younger, more vulnerable. There was something about him that tugged at something deep inside her, a feeling she could not quite name, but that left her unsettled in ways that were not entirely unpleasant. "You handled yourself well tonight," Dr. Harrington said from the doorway, making her jump. "As you always do. But Lila, be careful. He is a patient, nothing more." "Of course, Dr. Harrington," she replied, smoothing her apron with hands that were steadier than her pulse. "I will check on him periodically through the night to ensure his fever does not spike." The older man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "See that you do, and Lila, get some rest yourself. You have been here since dawn." After Dr. Harrington left for his own home a few blocks away, Lila tidied the examination room, scrubbing the blood from the floor and sterilizing the instruments they had used. The familiar routine helped calm her thoughts, though she found her gaze drifting toward the back room more often than it should. It was near midnight when she finally allowed herself to check on Vincent properly. She moved quietly, not wanting to wake him if he was sleeping peacefully, but as she approached the cot, his eyes opened. "Lila," he said, and there was something in the way he spoke her name that made her pulse quicken. "I was hoping you would come back. How are you feeling?" she asked, reaching out to feel his forehead for signs of fever. His skin was warm but not dangerously so. "Any increased pain or dizziness? Everything hurts," he admitted with a slight smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "But I have felt worse. That is not saying much, but it is the truth." She poured water from a pitcher into a cup, helping him sit up enough to drink. He winced at the movement but managed several long swallows before settling back against the pillow. "The men who brought you in said you were defending yourself in a bar fight," she said, pulling a chair close to the cot. She knew she should leave, should let him rest, but something kept her there. "What happened?" Vincent closed his eyes briefly. "Stupid, really. I work for the Brennan Ranch, about 10 miles north of here. We came into town for supplies and decided to stop at the saloon for a drink. Some drifters were bothering one of the working girls, getting rough with her. I told them to leave her alone, and things escalated from there. One of them pulled a gun. I am just grateful his aim was poor, or that I turned when I did. Could have been my heart instead of my shoulder." "That was brave of you," Lila said. "Foolish, perhaps, but brave." "My mother always said I had more courage than sense," Vincent replied, opening his eyes to look at her again. "She passed 5 years ago. I think she would have liked you." The statement caught Lila off guard. "You do not even know me." "I know you are kind. I know you have gentle hands and a steady presence. I know you did not flinch when you saw the blood, and you stayed calm when I was anything but. Those are not small things." Lila felt her cheeks warm again. "You were very brave during the surgery. Many men would have screamed or thrashed about." "I had good motivation to stay still," Vincent said, his gaze holding hers. "I did not want to make your job harder than it already was, and I wanted to keep looking at you. Even through the pain, that helped." She should have left then, should have made some excuse about needing to attend to other duties, but the honesty in his voice held her in place. "You should rest now," she finally managed. "Your body needs sleep to heal. Will you come back tomorrow?" he asked, his eyes already starting to drift closed again. "To check on me?" "I will be here," she promised. "I work every day." "Good," he murmured, and within moments his breathing had deepened into sleep. Lila sat there for a few more minutes, watching the rise and fall of his chest, before finally forcing herself to return to the front office where she kept a small cot for nights when she stayed late. But sleep eluded her for hours, her mind replaying the evening's events and the way Vincent's eyes had held hers, the way his hand had felt in hers, the way he had spoken her name as if it meant something more than just an identifier. The next morning arrived with the usual August heat, the sun beating down on San Pedro's dusty streets by the time Lila had washed and changed into a fresh dress. She prepared a simple breakfast of porridge and weak tea, appropriate for someone recovering from injury and blood loss, and carried it to Vincent's room. He was awake, sitting up gingerly against the wall, his face pale but alert. Someone, probably him, had opened the window, letting in whatever slight breeze could be found along with the sounds of the waking town. "Good morning," she said, setting the tray on the small table. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected," he replied, though the dark circles under his eyes suggested otherwise. "The pain woke me a few times, but nothing too terrible. That medicine Dr. Harrington gave me helped." She moved to check his bandages, unwrapping them carefully to examine the wounds. The stitches were holding well, and there was no sign of the angry red inflammation that would indicate infection. "This looks good," she told him. "You are healing cleanly so far." "Thanks to your skilled hands," he said. "And Dr. Harrington's, of course, but I suspect you did most of the detailed work." "I assisted," Lila said, rewrapping the shoulder with fresh bandages. "Dr. Harrington did the surgery, but you have done this before." "I could tell by the way you moved, the way you knew what was needed before he asked." "How long have you been working with him?" 3 years, she replied, helping him back into a clean shirt she had brought from the supply closet. "My father died when I was 17, leaving my mother and me with very little. I needed work, and Dr. Harrington needed an assistant. His previous one had married and moved away. He taught me everything he knows, or as much as I can learn without formal medical training." "Why not go to medical school yourself?" Vincent asked. "You clearly have the skill for it." Lila laughed, though there was little humor in the sound. "Women are not exactly welcomed in medical schools, even if I could afford it, which I cannot. No, I am content to be an assistant. It allows me to help people, and that is what matters." "You do more than help," Vincent said seriously. "Last night, when the pain was at its worst, it was your face I focused on, your voice I listened to. You were not just assisting, you were healing in your own right." His words touched something deep inside her, a yearning she had not fully acknowledged even to herself. The desire to be more than just an assistant, to be recognized for her own skills and knowledge. But such thoughts were impractical, even dangerous. Women who reached too high often found themselves with nothing at all. "Eat your breakfast," she said, deflecting the conversation to safer ground. "You need to rebuild your strength." Over the following days, Lila found herself spending more and more time in Vincent's room. Dr. Harrington tended to other patients and made his rounds of house calls throughout San Pedro, trusting Lila to monitor Vincent's recovery. She changed his bandages twice daily, brought him meals, and administered his medicine on schedule. But beyond the medical necessities, they talked. Vincent told her about growing up on a small ranch in Nevada, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about losing his mother to pneumonia and his father to a riding accident within 2 years of each other. He had drifted for a while after that, working various ranches across California before settling at the Brennan place 6 months ago. "I like the work," he said on the 3rd day, as Lila helped him take a few careful steps around the room to prevent his muscles from growing too weak. "There is something honest about it. You work hard, you get paid, you sleep well at night. No games, no pretense, just you and the cattle and the land." "You plan to stay there?" she asked, supporting his good arm as they made a slow circuit of the small space. "Or will you drift again?" "I have been thinking about saving money, maybe buying my own piece of land someday," Vincent admitted. "Nothing fancy, just enough for a small herd and a house. A place that is mine that no one can take away, but that is a long way off yet." Lila told him about her own life, about growing up as the daughter of a shopkeeper in San Pedro, about the childhood that had been happy if modest. She spoke of her father's sudden death from a heart ailment, and the scramble to survive afterward when they discovered he had debts they had not known about. "My mother takes in sewing now," Lila explained as she helped Vincent back to the cot, noting with satisfaction that he had walked farther today than yesterday. "Between her earnings and mine we manage. We have a small house near the edge of town. Nothing grand, but it is home." "You support your mother," Vincent observed. "That is why you cannot afford medical school even if they would accept you. The money you earn is needed at home." "Yes," Lila confirmed simply. There was no shame in it, only reality. "She sacrificed much for me growing up. It is my turn to care for her." On the 4th day, Dr. Harrington pronounced himself satisfied with Vincent's progress. "The wounds are healing remarkably well," he told them both. No sign of infection, and the stitches are holding. You have been fortunate, young man, and you have had excellent care. He glanced at Lila as he said this last part, and she felt a flush of pride. It was not often that Dr. Harrington offered direct compliments. I have had the best care, Vincent agreed, his eyes on Lila. I am grateful to both of you. You will still need to take it easy for at least another week or two, Dr. Harrington continued. No heavy lifting, no riding, no work that might strain that shoulder. After that, you can gradually return to normal activities. After Dr. Harrington left, Vincent turned to Lila with a thoughtful expression. I suppose this means I can leave here, find a room at the boarding house or something. The thought of him leaving, of not seeing him multiple times a day, sent an unexpected pang through Lila's chest. But she kept her voice level. You could, though Dr. Harrington will still need to check on you daily for at least a few more days. It would be convenient for you to stay here if you wish. You wish it? Vincent asked directly, and there was something vulnerable in his expression that made her heart twist. I think it would be medically advisable, she said carefully, unable to meet his eyes. Lila, he said, and the way he spoke her name made her look up. I am not asking what is medically advisable. I am asking what you want. She took a breath, feeling as though she stood at the edge of a precipice. Everything in her practical nature told her to step back, to maintain the professional distance between doctor's assistant and patient. But something stronger, something that had been growing with each conversation, each shared story, each moment their eyes met, pushed her forward. I would like you to stay, she admitted quietly, at least until you are fully healed. The smile that broke across Vincent's face was like sunrise, transforming his features from merely handsome to something that made her breath catch. Then, I will stay. Though I suspect I am already healing faster than either of us expected, thanks to you. That evening, after the office closed and Dr. Harrington had gone home, Lila brought dinner to Vincent's room. Instead of leaving him to eat alone as she had the previous nights, she brought her own plate and sat in the chair beside his cot. Tell me something about yourself that no one else knows, Vincent said as they ate the simple meal of beef stew and bread. Something you have never told anyone. Lila considered the question, turning it over in her mind. When I was a girl, maybe 10 or 11, I found a bird with a broken wing. I brought it home and tried to set the wing the way I had seen the town doctor set broken bones. I used twigs and strips of cloth, kept the bird in a box, fed it by hand. My mother thought I was wasting my time, that it would die anyway, but it healed. After a few weeks, I removed the splint and eventually it flew away. She paused, surprised by the emotion in her voice. That was when I knew I wanted to help heal things, not just birds but people. I wanted to understand how bodies work, how to fix what is broken. Vincent set down his spoon, giving her his full attention. And you have done that. You are doing that. As much as I am allowed, she said. But sometimes I wonder what I could do if I had real training, real education. If I could learn anatomy and surgery and pharmacology the way Dr. Harrington did. She shook her head. But that is a foolish dream. Women are not doctors. We are wives and mothers and assistants at best. I do not think it is foolish, Vincent said firmly. I think the world is foolish for not recognizing what you could be, what you already are, training or no training. Your turn, Lila said, deflecting before the conversation grew too intense. Tell me something no one else knows about you. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. I am afraid, he finally said. Afraid that I will drift forever, that I will never have a real home or family, that I will end up old and alone, just another cowboy with nothing to show for his life but scars and stories. I watch men at the ranch, men who are 40 or 50, still sleeping in bunkhouses and living on wages, and I wonder if that is my future too. I want more, but I am not sure I know how to get it, or if I even deserve it." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability, made Lila reach out without thinking, placing her hand over his. "You deserve whatever you want from life," she said. "Anyone who would step into a fight to protect someone else, who works hard and dreams of his own place, who has endured what you have endured with courage and grace deserves every good thing." Vincent turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "I have been in San Pedro less than a week, and already I have found something I did not know I was looking for." "What is that?" Lila whispered, though she thought she knew. "Someone who sees me, really sees me, not just another ranch hand or another patient, but me, Vincent." He squeezed her hand gently. "These past few days, talking with you, being around you, I have felt more at home than I have since my parents died. Is that strange?" "No," Lila said, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he must hear it. "It is not strange at all. I feel it too. This connection between us." They sat in silence for a while, hands joined, the remains of dinner forgotten. The summer evening light slanted through the window, painting everything in shades of gold, and somewhere in the distance, a ship's bell rang from the harbor. "I do not know what to do with this," Vincent finally said. "With these feelings. I have nothing to offer you, Lila. I am a cowboy with a bullet hole in his shoulder and barely enough money to my name to pay for my care here. You deserve someone established, someone who can give you security and comfort." "I do not want security if it comes with someone I do not care about," Lila replied. "I would rather have something real, even if it is uncertain, than something safe but empty." She paused, gathering courage. "My mother married for practical reasons. My father was a good man, and she grew to care for him, but it was never a love match. She has told me more than once to be smarter than she was, to find someone who makes my heart race as well as someone who can provide." "I never understood what she meant until now." "Your heart races when you are around me?" Vincent asked, and there was a note of wonder in his voice. "Yes," Lila admitted, feeling exposed but also strangely free. "It has since that first night, if I am being honest. Even covered in blood and dirt, even in pain, there was something about you that drew me in." Vincent used his good arm to pull her closer until she was sitting on the edge of the cot beside him. "I thought it was just the pain making me imagine things," he said. "The connection I felt with you, the way it seemed like you were the only real thing in a world gone hazy with hurt. But it was not the pain. It was you. You are extraordinary, Lila Whitmore." She found herself leaning in, drawn by something stronger than logic or propriety. Vincent met her halfway, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was gentle and questioning and somehow perfect. When they broke apart, both breathing faster, Lila felt as though the world had shifted somehow, as though everything had been leading to this moment. "We should be careful," she whispered, even as she made no move to pull away. "If Dr. Harrington found out, or if people in town talked, it could damage both our reputations." "Then we will be discreet," Vincent said, pressing his forehead to hers. "But I cannot pretend I do not feel this, Lila. I will not insult you or myself by denying what is between us." Over the next 3 days, their relationship deepened in stolen moments and quiet conversations. Lila would sit with Vincent in the evenings after Dr. Harrington had left, and they would talk about everything and nothing. He told her about the desert landscapes of Nevada, about sleeping under stars so numerous they looked like spilled sugar across black velvet. She told him about the ocean, about watching ships arrive from distant places and imagining the worlds beyond San Pedro's harbor. They shared more kisses, carefully timed for when no one else was around, each one deepening the connection between them. Vincent was respectful, always mindful of propriety and her reputation, but the passion between them was undeniable. Lila found herself thinking about him constantly, counting the hours until she could see him again, finding excuses to check on him more frequently than his medical condition required. On the 8th day after his injury, Dr. Harrington declared Vincent well enough to leave. "The wounds have closed nicely," he said, examining Vincent's shoulder with a satisfied expression. "The stitches can come out in another few days, but you no longer need constant monitoring. You should be able to return to light work within a week, though I would avoid anything too strenuous for at least another month." Lila felt her heart sink at the pronouncement, even though she had known it was coming. Vincent caught her eye over Dr. Harrington's shoulder, and she saw her own dismay reflected in his expression. "I have already arranged a room at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house," Vincent said. "I will come back in a few days for the stitch removal, as you said." After Dr. Harrington left, Lila helped Vincent gather his few belongings. His shirt was ruined beyond repair, but she had managed to clean and mend his vest, and his hat had survived the ordeal intact if somewhat worse for wear. "This is not goodbye," Vincent said firmly, taking her hands in his. "I am only moving a few blocks away, and I will be here for the stitch removal. But even after that, Lila, I want to keep seeing you, properly if you will allow it. I know I should speak to your mother first, ask permission to court you, but I wanted to know your feelings before I did that." "Yes," Lila said without hesitation. "Yes, I want that too." "Then I will call on you tomorrow evening if that is acceptable," Vincent said. "I will meet your mother, do this the right way. You deserve that." After he left, the recovery room felt painfully empty. Lila threw herself into her work, helping Dr. Harrington with his afternoon patients, but her mind was elsewhere. She was simultaneously thrilled and terrified by what was happening between her and Vincent. It had all occurred so fast, this connection that felt deeper than anything she had experienced before. Was it real, or just a product of the intense circumstances under which they had met? That evening she told her mother about Vincent. Margaret Whitmore listened carefully as Lila described the injured cowboy, the week of his recovery, and his intention to call on them. "You care for him," Margaret observed, studying her daughter's face. "This is not just a passing fancy." "No, Mother, it is not," Lila admitted. "I know it seems sudden, but there is something between us, something real and deep. He is kind and honest and hardworking, and when I am with him, I feel like I can be completely myself." Margaret was silent for a long moment. "Your father and I, as I have told you, married for practical reasons. He needed a wife, I needed security. We built a good life together, and I cared for him deeply by the end. But there was never that spark, that passion. I see it in you now when you speak of this, Vincent, and part of me is happy for you. But part of me worries. Passion fades, Lila. Practical matters remain." "I know," Lila said. "But Mother, you told me to find someone who makes my heart race. Vincent does that. And he has plans, dreams of owning his own land. He is not some drifter with no ambition. He works hard and saves his money." "Then I will meet him with an open mind," Margaret said finally. "But Lila, promise me you will not let your heart overrule your head completely. Love is important, but so is being able to eat and keep a roof over your head." Vincent arrived the next evening precisely at the time Lila had indicated, dressed in clean clothes and holding a small bouquet of wildflowers he must have picked on the walk to their house. Lila performed the introductions, noting the way Vincent's natural charm seemed to work on her mother just as it had on her. He was respectful and deferential, answering Margaret's questions about his work and prospects without exaggeration or false bravado. He explained his position at the Brennan Ranch, his wages, his savings, and his long-term goal of purchasing his own land. He spoke of his parents and his upbringing, painting a picture of himself as someone grounded in hard work and traditional values. By the end of the evening, even Margaret seemed cautiously approving. "You may call on Lila again," she told Vincent as he prepared to leave, "but I expect you to respect her reputation and be honorable in your intentions." "I would never be anything less, madam," Vincent assured her. "Your daughter is the finest woman I have ever met. I consider it a privilege that she is willing to spend time with me." After he left, Margaret turned to Lila with a small smile. "He is charming, I will give him that, and he seems sincere. But Lila, please be cautious. You have known him less than 2 weeks." "I know, Mother," Lila said, "but sometimes you just know. Is that not what you have always told me? That when you find the right person, you feel it in your bones?" "Yes," Margaret admitted. "I suppose I did say that." "Just promise me you will take your time, not rush into anything." Lila promised, though in her heart, she already knew that Vincent was special, that what they had was worth pursuing regardless of the brevity of their acquaintance. Over the following weeks, Vincent became a regular fixture in Lila's life. He returned to the doctor's office 3 days later to have his stitches removed, a procedure that Lila performed under Doctor Harrington's supervision. Her hands were steady despite the way her heart raced at his nearness, and she worked efficiently to remove the threads that had held his wounds closed. "Excellent work, Miss Whitmore," Dr. Harrington said, examining her handiwork. "The scars will be minimal, thanks to your careful stitching and Mr. Quad's diligent care of the wounds." After that, Vincent had no medical reason to visit the office, but he found other reasons. He would stop by at the end of Lila's workday, walking her home through San Pedro's dusty streets. They would take the long route when weather permitted, talking about their days and their dreams. On Sundays, when Lila had half the day off, they would take longer walks along the bluffs overlooking the harbor, watching ships come and go while discussing everything from politics to philosophy to their hopes for the future. Vincent had returned to light work at the Brennan Ranch, carefully following Dr. Harrington's restrictions. He would ride into town 2 or 3 times a week, and each time he brought small gifts for Lila. Never anything extravagant that might cause talk or that he could not afford, but thoughtful things. A particularly beautiful seashell he had found on the beach, a book of poetry he had bought from a traveling merchant, ribbons in a shade of blue that matched her eyes. They fell into a comfortable pattern, a courtship that was both chaste and charged with suppressed passion. Vincent always behaved as a gentleman should, never pushing beyond what was proper for an unmarried couple. But the attraction between them was palpable, evident in the way they would lean toward each other unconsciously, in the lingering quality of their goodbyes, in the way their hands would find each other whenever they were alone. 6 weeks after Vincent's injury, he appeared at the doctor's office just as Lila was preparing to close up for the day. Dr. Harrington had already left for home, and she was tidying the examination room when she heard the door open. "Vincent," she said, surprised. "I was not expecting you today. Is something wrong with your shoulder?" "My shoulder is fine," he said, but there was a tension in his expression that worried her. "Lila, can we talk? Somewhere private." She led him to the recovery room where he had spent that first week, her mind racing with possibilities. Had he changed his mind about their courtship? Had something happened at the ranch? Once inside, Vincent closed the door and turned to face her. "I have been offered a foreman position at a ranch near Santa Barbara," he said without preamble. "It is a good opportunity, better pay, more responsibility, the kind of position that could lead to me saving enough for my own place much faster than I could here." Lila felt her stomach drop. Santa Barbara was over 100 miles away, a full day's journey by stage. "That is wonderful," she managed, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "You should take it." "That depends," Vincent said, stepping closer. "Lila, I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other for 6 weeks. But I also know that what I feel for you is real and deep and unlike anything I have felt before. I love you. I am in love with you. And I do not want to go to Santa Barbara unless you come with me. As my wife." Lila felt her breath leave her lungs in a rush. "Vincent, I know what you are going to say," he interrupted. "That it is too soon, that we should wait, that we should be practical. And maybe you are right. But Lila, I wake up thinking about you and fall asleep with your name on my lips. When good things happen, you are the person I want to tell. When things are hard, you are the person I want beside me. I look at the future and I cannot imagine it without you in it." "I feel the same way," Lila whispered. "But Vincent, my mother, my work here with Dr. Harrington. I cannot just abandon my responsibilities." "I would never ask you to abandon anything," Vincent said earnestly. "I have thought about this, planned it out. Santa Barbara is a growing town. They need medical professionals. You could find work there, maybe even with a doctor who would appreciate your skills. And your mother, if she is willing, could come with us. The foreman position comes with a house, small but decent. There would be room for her. Or if she prefers to stay here, we could send money to support her. I would never ask you to choose between her and me." Lila's mind spun with the possibilities, with the enormity of what he was proposing. Marriage, moving away from the only home she had ever known, starting a new life in a new place with a man she had known for less than 2 months. Everything practical in her nature screamed that it was too fast, too risky, too uncertain. But her heart, the part of her that had been drawn to Vincent from that first night, the part that had grown to love him more with each passing day, that part knew the answer with absolute certainty. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Vincent, I will marry you." The joy that lit his face was like nothing she had ever seen. He pulled her into his arms, careful of his still healing shoulder, and kissed her with a passion they had kept carefully restrained throughout their courtship. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you will never regret this," he said. "I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you, trying to give you the life you deserve." "You already are worthy," Lila said. "You already have." They decided to break the news to Margaret that evening. Lila's mother took the announcement with surprising calm, studying Vincent's earnest face and Lila's glowing expression. "You are certain about this?" Margaret asked Lila. "You understand what you are giving up, leaving San Pedro, leaving your work with Dr. Harrington?" "I am certain," Lila said firmly. "Mother, I love him, and I want to build a life with him." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed, a sound that carried both resignation and acceptance. "Your father and I, we had a good marriage, a practical marriage, but I always wondered what it would have been like if I had taken a chance on passion instead. I will not stand in your way, Lila. If this is what you truly want, then you have my blessing." "Come with us," Lila urged. "Vincent said there is room in the foreman's house. You would not have to take in sewing any more. We could care for you." But Margaret shook her head. "No, dear, this is your adventure, yours and Vincent's. You need to start your married life without an old woman looking over your shoulders. I have friends here, a life here. I will stay, but I expect you to write frequently and visit when you can." Lila felt tears sting her eyes even as she nodded understanding. Part of her was relieved. The thought of starting fresh in a new place with just Vincent felt like an adventure, a chance to build something entirely their own. But leaving her mother behind carried its own pain. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Lila gave Dr. Harrington notice, and he took the news with more grace than she had expected. "I wondered if something like this might happen," he admitted. The way that young man looked at you and you at him, I knew it was a matter of time. I will miss you terribly, Lila. You have been the best assistant I could have asked for, but I wish you every happiness." "Thank you," Lila said, genuinely touched, "for everything you have taught me, for the opportunity you gave me. I will never forget it." "If things do not work out in Santa Barbara," Dr. Harrington said, "if you need to return, there will always be a position for you here. You remember that." Vincent and Lila decided on a simple wedding, to be held in the small church in San Pedro before they departed for Santa Barbara. It was scheduled for the end of October, giving them time to make arrangements, but not so long that the ranch in Santa Barbara would lose patience with Vincent's delayed arrival. The wedding was a modest affair, attended by Margaret, Dr. Harrington, a few of Vincent's friends from the Brennan Ranch, and some neighbors who had known Lila growing up. Lila wore a simple dress of cream-colored cotton that her mother had helped her sew, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Vincent wore his Sunday best, his dark hair neatly combed, his face shining with joy. As they stood before the minister and spoke their vows, Lila felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she was meant to be, with this man who had come into her life so unexpectedly and changed everything. When Vincent slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Vincent kissed her with tender reverence, she knew she had made the right choice. The reception was held at Margaret's house, with simple food and homemade wine. It was nothing fancy, but it was filled with warmth and good wishes. When it came time to leave, Lila embraced her mother tightly, both women fighting back tears. "Be happy," Margaret whispered. "That is all I have ever wanted for you. Be happy and be loved." "I will," Lila promised. "And I am. I truly am." Vincent had arranged for them to stay their wedding night at a small hotel in San Pedro before departing for Santa Barbara the next morning. As he carried her over the threshold of their room, Lila felt a flutter of nerves mixed with anticipation. They had been so careful during their courtship, never allowing themselves to be truly alone or to go beyond proper boundaries. Now, suddenly, they were married, and everything was different. Vincent seemed to sense her nervousness. He set her down gently and took her hands in his. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said softly. "We have all the time in the world." But Lila shook her head, cupping his face in her hands. "I am ready," she said. "I want this. I want you. I have wanted you since that first night, if I am being completely honest. It just took me a while to admit it to myself." What followed was a revelation, a tenderness mixed with passion that left Lila feeling both vulnerable and cherished. Vincent was patient and gentle, attentive to her responses, clearly as concerned with her pleasure as his own. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow hotel bed, Lila felt a completeness she had not known was possible. "I love you, Lila Quad," Vincent murmured into her hair, his arm secure around her waist. "I love you too," she replied, feeling the truth of it down to her bones. More than I knew it was possible to love someone. The journey to Santa Barbara the next day took nearly 10 hours by stagecoach, the landscape changing gradually from the coastal flats around San Pedro to more rolling hills as they traveled north. Vincent pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his travels through this region in his earlier drifting days. Lila watched it all with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, this new world she was entering as a married woman. They arrived in Santa Barbara in the early evening, and Lila got her first glimpse of what would be her new home. The town was larger than San Pedro, bustling with activity even at this late hour. The Santa Barbara Ranch was located about 5 miles outside of town, and the ranch owner, Mr. Callahan, had sent a wagon to collect them from the stage station. The ranch itself was impressive, sprawling across several hundred acres with a large main house, multiple outbuildings, and the foreman's cottage where Vincent and Lila would live. The cottage was small, as Vincent had warned, but it was charming in its simplicity. 2 rooms downstairs consisting of a main living area with a kitchen corner and a bathing room, and a sleeping loft above reached by a narrow ladder. The furniture was basic but functional, and someone, probably Mr. Callahan's wife, had left fresh linens and a basket of supplies to welcome them. "It is not much," Vincent said, watching Lila's face anxiously as she surveyed their new home. "But it is ours, and I promise, as I save more, we will have something better." "It is perfect," Lila said honestly, turning to embrace him. "It is more than perfect because it is ours, just as you said." "We will make it a home, Vincent." The first few weeks in Santa Barbara were an adjustment. Vincent's days as foreman were long and demanding. He was responsible for overseeing the other ranch hands, managing the cattle, coordinating with Mr. Callahan on decisions about breeding and selling, and handling countless other details. He would leave before dawn and often not return until after dark, exhausted and covered in dust and sweat. Lila, meanwhile, had to establish her own place in this new community. She spent the first week setting up their cottage, making it as comfortable as possible with their limited resources. She sewed curtains from fabric she bought in town, arranged their few possessions to best advantage, and learned to cook on the temperamental stove that came with the cottage. But she also knew she needed to find work. The money Vincent made as foreman was decent, but it was not enough to save for their own land at the rate they wanted, and Lila was not accustomed to being idle. She had skills and knowledge, and she intended to use them. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. 3 weeks after their arrival, one of the ranch hands suffered a severe gash on his arm from a piece of broken equipment. The nearest doctor was in town, 5 miles away, and the man was bleeding heavily. Someone ran to fetch Lila, having heard that she had worked with a doctor. She assessed the wound quickly, recognizing that while it was deep, it had not severed any major blood vessels. She cleaned and stitched it with supplies she had brought from San Pedro, talking the injured man through the procedure with the same calm competence she had shown with Vincent months earlier. Word of her skill spread quickly through the ranch and into the surrounding community. Within a few weeks, people were coming to the cottage seeking her help for various ailments. Nothing major, as she would always insist that serious cases be seen by the doctor in town, but minor injuries, illnesses, and complaints that did not warrant the journey to Santa Barbara proper. Lila found herself falling back into a rhythm she knew and loved, treating patients with the knowledge Dr. Harrington had taught her. She charged modest fees, building up a small income of her own that she added to their savings. Vincent was supportive and proud, telling anyone who would listen about his talented wife. Their first winter in Santa Barbara was mild compared to what they would have experienced farther north, but it still brought rain and cooler temperatures. Lila and Vincent settled into married life, learning each other's rhythms and habits. They had their disagreements, as any couple does, but they were minor and quickly resolved. More often, they found themselves marveling at how easily they fit together, how natural it felt to share a life. In early December, Lila began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited to be certain before telling Vincent, not wanting to raise false hopes. But when 3 months had passed with no sign of her courses and other symptoms became apparent, she knew it was time to share the news. She chose a Sunday evening when Vincent had half the day off. She had prepared his favorite meal, and after they ate, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is a baby," she said simply. "Our baby, growing right here." Vincent's face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, wonder, and finally something like reverence. "A baby," he repeated. "Lila, we are going to have a baby." "Yes," she confirmed, laughing at his dazed expression. "Sometime in late June or early July, I think." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she had to remind him to be gentle. "This is the best news," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The absolute best news. I am going to be a father, and you are going to be a mother. We are going to be a family." "We already are a family," Lila corrected gently. "But yes, we are growing." Vincent became even more attentive after that, almost comically so. He worried about her overworking herself, tried to limit the patients she saw, insisted she rest more than she felt necessary. Lila found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating, having to remind him that pregnancy was not an illness, and that women had been working through them since the beginning of time. As winter turned to spring, Lila's pregnancy became more visible. The ranch community was supportive and excited, and several of the ranch wives took Lila under their wings, sharing advice and practical items they had saved from their own children. Lila wrote long letters to her mother, describing her growing belly, her preparations for the baby, and her happiness in her marriage. Margaret's return letters were warm and encouraging, full of her own excitement about becoming a grandmother. She sent packages of baby clothes she had sewn and knitted, each item made with obvious love and care. In early June, as Lila's due date approached, Vincent became increasingly anxious. He arranged for one of the ranch wives, a woman named Sarah who had delivered 6 children of her own, to be on call when Lila went into labor. He also insisted that they send word to the doctor in town, wanting professional help available if needed. Labor came on a hot July afternoon, starting with mild cramps that gradually intensified into powerful contractions. Sarah arrived quickly, taking charge with calm efficiency. The doctor came as well, but as it turned out, his presence was not needed. After 8 hours of labor, Lila delivered a healthy baby boy into Sarah's capable hands. Vincent, who had been pacing outside, was finally allowed in to meet his son. The look on his face as Lila placed the tiny bundle in his arms was something she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. Wonder and love and fierce protectiveness all mingled together. "What should we name him?" Vincent asked, his voice barely above a whisper as though afraid to disturb the sleeping infant. "What about James?" Lila suggested, thinking of Vincent's father. "James Vincent Quad." "James," Vincent repeated, smiling down at his son. "Welcome to the world, James. Your mother and I have been waiting for you." The weeks after James's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings. Lila was grateful for the advice and help from the other ranch wives, who brought meals and shared wisdom. Vincent was a devoted father, taking over as much as he could when he was home, changing diapers and walking the floor with James when he fussed. As summer turned to fall, they settled into a new rhythm as a family of 3. Lila returned to seeing patients once James was old enough to be watched by one of the neighbor women for a few hours at a time. The income was still modest but meaningful, adding steadily to their savings. One evening in late October, nearly a year after their wedding, Vincent came home with barely contained excitement. "I have been talking to Mr. Callahan," he said, scooping James up and tossing him gently in the air, earning delighted giggles from the baby. "He knows I have been saving to buy my own land. He has a parcel, about 40 acres on the edge of his property that he is willing to sell at a fair price. It is good land, Lila, with water access and decent grazing. We could run a small herd, maybe 50 head to start, build a proper house." "Do we have enough saved?" Lila asked, her heart beginning to race with excitement. "Almost," Vincent said. "If we are careful, if we keep saving like we have been, we could make the purchase by spring." Mr. Callahan said he would hold it for us, would not sell to anyone else if we give him our word that we are serious. "Then we give him our word," Lila said without hesitation. "This is what we have been working toward, what we have dreamed about, our own land, our own place." They celebrated that night after James was asleep, planning out their future with the optimism of youth and love. They would build a small house first, nothing fancy but solid and comfortable. They would start with a modest herd and grow gradually. Lila could continue her medical work, perhaps even more formally if they built near enough to the main road. They would have more children, a big family to fill the house with noise and love. The months passed quickly, winter sliding into spring. Lila and Vincent saved every penny they could, sacrificing comforts and luxuries to build their nest egg. By March, they had enough, and the transaction was completed. 40 acres of California land, deed bearing the name Vincent Quad, with Lila Quad listed as co-owner. "It is really ours," Lila said, standing on their new property with James balanced on her hip. The land rolled gently toward a creek that marked the eastern boundary, with oak trees scattered across the hillsides. "I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Vincent said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "We did this, Lila, together. Everything I dreamed about, everything I thought I would never have, it is all right here. This land, this child, you are my home. You always will be." They built their house that summer, with help from some of the men from the Callahan Ranch. It was modest, just 3 rooms, a kitchen and living area, a bedroom, and a small second room for James and any future children. But it had real glass windows and a solid roof, and a porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sun set over their land. They moved in September, nearly 2 years after they had arrived in Santa Barbara. Lila's medical practice grew as word spread that the foreman's wife, who had moved to her own land, would still see patients. People would ride out from town or from neighboring ranches, and Lila would treat them in a corner of the kitchen she had set up for that purpose. Vincent worked harder than ever, building their herd with careful purchases and strategic breeding. He hired one ranch hand to help with the daily work, a young man named Tom who proved to be reliable and hardworking. Slowly, steadily, their ranch began to thrive. James grew from baby to toddler, and Lila found herself pregnant again in the spring of their 3rd year in Santa Barbara. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, and in November, she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Margaret, after Lila's mother. Margaret Whitmore made the journey to Santa Barbara for the birth, staying for 2 months to help with the new baby, and to finally see the life her daughter had built. She was impressed by what Lila and Vincent had accomplished, by the solid house and thriving ranch, and the obvious love that filled every corner of their lives. "You were right to follow your heart," Margaret told Lila one evening as they sat together, watching Vincent play with James while baby Margaret slept in her cradle. "I worried. You know I did. But this life you have built, this family, it is beautiful. Your father would have been so proud." "I am happy, Mother," Lila said simply. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be." The years passed in a rhythm of hard work and quiet joy. The ranch grew steadily more prosperous. Vincent proved to have a natural talent for managing cattle and land, and his reputation as an honest dealer meant he got fair prices when he sold his steers. Lila's medical practice also expanded. She treated everything from cuts and colds to helping deliver babies for women in the surrounding area. They had 2 more children over the next 5 years. Another boy they named William, and a girl they named Sarah after the ranch wife who had helped deliver James. Their house, which had seemed adequately sized when they built it, grew cramped with 6 people, so Vincent added 2 more bedrooms and expanded the kitchen. The older children began to help with ranch chores as soon as they were able. James, as the oldest, was particularly devoted to working alongside his father, learning everything Vincent could teach him about cattle and horses and land management. Margaret proved to have her mother's healing instincts, often sitting beside Lila when she treated patients, watching and asking questions with a sharp intelligence that reminded Lila of herself at that age. In the summer of 1890, 8 years after that fateful night when Vincent had been carried into Dr. Harrington's office with a bullet wound in his shoulder, Lila stood on the porch of their home watching her family. Vincent and 12-year-old James were working with a new horse in the corral. 10-year-old Margaret was helping 6-year-old William collect eggs from the chicken coop. 4-year-old Sarah was playing in the dirt with a collection of smooth stones she had gathered by the creek. The ranch had grown to nearly 200 acres as they had been able to purchase adjoining parcels, and their herd numbered over 300 head. They had built a proper barn and outbuildings. They had good relationships with their neighbors and a solid standing in the Santa Barbara community. They had 4 healthy, happy children, and a marriage that had only deepened and strengthened with time. Vincent caught her eye across the yard and smiled. That same smile that still made her heart skip a beat even after all these years. He said something to James, then walked toward the house, his gait still slightly favored on the left where that old bullet wound sometimes ached when the weather changed. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, climbing the porch steps to stand beside her. "Everything," Lila said, leaning into him as his arm came around her waist. "How far we have come, how different our lives could have been. Do you ever regret it?" Vincent asked, and she heard the vulnerability in his voice, the echo of the young cowboy who had once told her he had nothing to offer. "Choosing this life, choosing me." Lila turned to face him fully, taking his face in her hands the way she had on their wedding night and so many times since. "Never, not for a single moment. Vincent, you gave me everything I did not even know I wanted. This life, this family, this love. It is more than I ever dreamed." "I should be saying that to you," Vincent said softly. "That first night, when I was lying on that examination table thinking I might die from the pain, you looked at me and suddenly I had a reason to fight. Every day since then, you have given me reasons to be better, to work harder, to build something lasting. You healed more than just my wounds, Lila. You healed parts of me I did not even know were broken." Lila felt tears prick her eyes at his words, at the echo of the thoughts she had had so many times over the years, but had never quite articulated. "You healed me too," she said. "I did not realize how small my world had become until you showed me what it could be. You believed in me, in my skills and my dreams, in ways no one else ever had. You made me brave enough to want more from life." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Around them, their children played and worked, the sounds of their voices a testament to the life Vincent and Lila had built together. "You remember what you said to me?" Lila asked suddenly. "That first night when you were flirting despite the pain, you said the view had improved considerably." Vincent laughed, the sound rich and warm. "I remember. I also remember thinking I must be delirious, that no woman as beautiful as you could possibly be real. And then I woke up and you were still there, and I knew I had to do whatever it took to keep you in my life. I fell in love with you that night," Lila admitted, "or at least began to. Something about the way you bore the pain, the way you looked at me like I was the only thing keeping you anchored. I tried to tell myself it was just the intensity of the situation, but even then, I knew it was more. Love at first sight, Vincent said with a grin. Or at least first surgery. Lila laughed, swatting his arm gently. It was not quite that simple, and you know it, but there was something there from the beginning, something neither of us could deny. They were interrupted by James calling out that he had successfully saddled the new horse. Vincent gave Lila a quick kiss before heading back to the corral to inspect his son's work. Lila watched him go, her heart full to bursting with love and gratitude for the life they shared. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house had grown quiet, Lila and Vincent sat together on the porch as they often did. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars Vincent had described to her years ago, when telling her about sleeping out on the range. "I have been thinking," Vincent said, his arm around Lila's shoulders, her head resting against his chest so she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "About hiring another hand or two, expanding the operation a bit more. James is getting old enough to take on real responsibility, and I think he would do well with more to manage." "He would," Lila agreed. "He is so much like you, wanting to prove himself, wanting to build something that lasts." "I want to make sure we have something solid to pass on to our children," Vincent continued. "Not just the land and the cattle, but the knowledge of how to work hard, how to treat people fairly, how to build a life worth living." "You are already teaching them that," Lila assured him. "Every day, by example. They see how you work, how you treat me and them, how you handle yourself with honor and integrity. Those lessons matter more than acres or cattle counts." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life," he said softly. "That I have a woman like you, children like them, land that belongs to me. It feels like something that should happen to someone better, someone more deserving." "You deserve every bit of it," Lila said fiercely, sitting up to look at him. "Vincent, you are one of the best men I have ever known. You work harder than anyone I have met. You love me and our children with everything you have. You treat people with respect regardless of their station. You have built all of this through your own effort and determination. Do not ever think you do not deserve the good things in your life." He pulled her close, kissing her with a passion that still burned as bright as it had on their wedding night. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured against her lips. "It was not luck," Lila replied. "It was a bullet wound, a bar fight, and two people brave enough to take a chance on each other." They laughed together, the sound carrying out into the night. Inside the house, one of the children stirred briefly before settling back to sleep. The cattle lowed softly in the distance. A coyote called from somewhere beyond the creek. As they sat together under the stars, Lila reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. If someone had told her 8 years ago, as she prepared for another ordinary day as Dr. Harrington's assistant, that a wounded cowboy would change her entire life, she would have dismissed it as fantasy. But life, she had learned, was often stranger and more wonderful than anything she could have imagined. She thought about that young woman she had been, living in San Pedro, content with her modest existence and not daring to dream of anything more. She thought about Vincent, drifting from ranch to ranch, believing himself destined for a solitary life. Two people on separate paths, brought together by chance and injury and need. But it had not been just chance, had it? It had been choices. Her choice to speak up when she saw him in pain. His choice to stay in San Pedro rather than moving on as soon as he was healed. Her choice to admit her feelings. His choice to propose marriage despite the impracticality of it. Their mutual choice to build something together, to work hard and sacrifice and believe in a future they could create with their own hands. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, his breath warm against her hair. "About choices," Lila said. "About how we make 100 small choices every day, and most of them seem meaningless in the moment. But sometimes, one choice changes everything, like the choice to stop and help you that night. Or your choice to defend a woman being mistreated in a bar, which led to you getting shot, which led to you meeting me. Funny how that works, Vincent agreed. If I had not stepped in, I would never have been shot, but I also would never have met you, never have had this life. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. They fell into comfortable silence, the kind that only comes between two people who know each other deeply and completely. Lila thought about all the moments that had led to this one. The conversations in the recovery room during that first week, the tentative courtship that followed, the leap of faith they had taken in marrying so quickly, the journey to Santa Barbara, and the years of building their ranch and their family. Each moment had been a brick in the foundation of the life they now shared. Each challenge they had faced, from the difficult early months when money was tight to the sleepless nights with colicky babies, to the hard physical labor of building a ranch from almost nothing, had strengthened their bond rather than weakening it. "You think our children will understand?" Lila asked suddenly. "When they are older, when they have families of their own, will they understand how much love and work went into building all of this for them?" "I think they will," Vincent said thoughtfully. "Maybe not right away. Maybe not until they have their own children and realize what it means to build something lasting, to create a legacy. But yes, I think they will understand eventually. And I hope they will appreciate it, not just the material things, but the love behind it." "I hope so too," Lila said. "I want them to know that anything is possible if you are willing to work for it, and if you have the right person beside you. I want them to understand that true wealth is not measured in land or cattle, but in the relationships you build and the love you share." Vincent hugged her tighter. "They will know, because we will keep showing them every day what real love looks like. Not perfect because we are not perfect, but real and committed and enduring." As the night grew later, they finally retreated inside to their bedroom. In the quiet darkness, with Vincent's arms around her and the soft sounds of their children sleeping in the nearby rooms, Lila felt a completeness that she knew not everyone was fortunate enough to experience. She thought back to that August night 8 years ago, to the moment when Vincent had been carried through the door of the doctor's office. At the time, she had seen only a patient who needed help, a medical challenge to be met. She could never have imagined that the wounded cowboy would become the center of her world, that his presence would transform her life in ways both large and small. In the darkness, she whispered the words that had been building in her heart all evening, the words that seemed to encompass everything she felt. "You healed more than just your wounds." Vincent stirred beside her. "What did you say?" Lila turned to face him, her hand finding his in the darkness. "You healed more than just your wounds," she repeated, her voice stronger now. "That first night I helped Dr. Harrington patch up your shoulder, and I thought that was the extent of it. A medical procedure, a patient recovering, nothing more. But Vincent, you healed something in me that night too. You healed the part of me that had stopped dreaming, stopped believing that life could be more than just surviving day to day. You healed the loneliness I did not even realize I carried. You healed my fear of wanting too much, of reaching for happiness. Every day since then, you have continued that healing, making me stronger and braver and more complete than I ever was alone." Vincent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Lila, you give me too much credit. I was just a cowboy who got shot defending someone. Nothing heroic, nothing special." "You are wrong," Lila said firmly. "You were heroic and you are special. Not because of grand gestures or dramatic actions, but because of who you are at your core. Because you saw me not just as a doctor's assistant or as a woman who could help you, but as a person with value and dreams and potential. Because you believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. Because you offered me a partnership, not just a marriage. Because you have loved me consistently and deeply for 8 years, through good times and hard times, never wavering in your commitment. You make it sound like effort, Vincent said softly. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. Everything else in my life required work and struggle and perseverance, but loving you, that was as natural as breathing from the first moment I saw your face. Lila felt tears slip down her cheeks in the darkness. I love you so much it frightens me sometimes. The depth of it, the completeness of it. You are woven into every part of my life, every part of who I am. I cannot imagine existing without you. You will never have to, Vincent promised, pulling her closer. I am here, Lila. I will always be here. Whatever comes, we will face it together, just as we have faced everything else. They held each other in the darkness, two people who had found something rare and precious in each other. Outside, the wind whispered through the oak trees. The creek burbled over its rocky bed. The cattle shifted and settled in the pasture. All the sounds of the life they had built together, the tangible evidence of their love and hard work. In the years that followed, the Quad Ranch continued to prosper. Their children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. James did indeed take over much of the daily ranch management as he grew older, showing the same dedication and work ethic as his father. Margaret pursued her interest in healing, working alongside her mother and talking seriously about trying to attend medical school, despite the challenges that would entail for a woman. Vincent and Lila grew older together, their love deepening rather than fading with time. They weathered the inevitable challenges that came with life in rural California. Droughts that tested the land, cattle diseases that threatened their herd, economic downturns that affected prices, and the usual struggles of raising children and running a business. But through it all, they had each other. When Vincent worried about money or cattle or the future, Lila was there to offer perspective and support. When Lila grew frustrated with the limitations placed on her because of her gender, or when she missed her mother who had passed away peacefully in San Pedro, Vincent was there to comfort and encourage. They created traditions as a family. Sunday dinners where no matter how much work needed to be done, they all gathered around the table. Annual trips to San Pedro so the children could see where their parents had met and married. Regular visits from the friends they had made in Santa Barbara, turning their home into a gathering place for the community. Through it all, Lila never forgot that August night in 1882 when a wounded cowboy had changed her life. She kept the small bottle that had held the carbolic acid solution. They used to clean Vincent's wounds, now empty, but preserved as a reminder of where they had started. Sometimes, when she was alone, she would take it out and hold it, marveling at the journey that had begun with such an ordinary medical procedure and had led to such an extraordinary life. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Vincent surprised Lila with a gift. They were not usually extravagant with such things, preferring to put money toward the ranch or their children's futures, but this time he had saved and planned. He led her out to the barn, where a brand new buggy sat gleaming in the afternoon light. But it was not just any buggy. On the side, in carefully painted letters, it read, Dr. Lila Quad Medical Services. You are not officially a doctor, Vincent said, watching her face anxiously. But you do the work of one. You have the skills of one. You should have the recognition, even if the world is too foolish to give it to you formally. Everyone around here knows to come to you when they need help. This just makes it official. Lila stood there, staring at the buggy, tears streaming down her face. It was more than just a vehicle for making house calls. It was validation, recognition, respect. It was Vincent's way of telling her that he saw her not as just his wife or the mother of his children, but as a skilled professional in her own right. "Thank you," she whispered, throwing her arms around him. "Thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for never asking me to be less than I am." "I could never ask that," Vincent said, holding her tight. "You are extraordinary, Lila. You always have been. From that very first night when you stayed so calm and capable while I was bleeding all over the examination room. I knew then that you were someone special, someone remarkable. Marrying you, building this life with you, it has been the greatest privilege of my existence." They stood there in the barn, holding each other as they had so many times over the years. Two people who had built something lasting and beautiful from a chance encounter and a willingness to take risks for love. As their children grew and eventually began to leave home, starting their own lives and families, the ranch evolved. James married a girl from a neighboring ranch and brought her home to help run the operation. Margaret did indeed manage to attend medical school back east, one of only a handful of women in her class, and returned to practice medicine in Santa Barbara with her mother's blessing and support. Vincent and Lila found themselves alone again, much as they had been in those early days in the foreman's cottage. But now they were older, weathered by time and experience, and more deeply connected than ever. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the land they had claimed and tamed and loved, and they would talk about the life they had built together. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered for a celebration. The house was full of noise and laughter, with 3 generations of quads sharing stories and food and love. As the evening wound down, James stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that hard work matters, that love endures, and that anything is possible if you have the courage to reach for it. Thank you for building not just this ranch, but this family. Thank you for showing us what real partnership looks like. Thank you for loving each other so well that we all knew we were loved too." As everyone raised their glasses, Lila caught Vincent's eye across the crowded room. The look they shared needed no words. It spoke of everything they had been through, everything they had built, everything they still were to each other after all these years. Later that night, alone again in their bedroom, Vincent pulled Lila into his arms. 25 years, he marveled. A quarter of a century since we stood in that little church in San Pedro and promised to love each other for better or worse. "It has been mostly better," Lila said with a smile. "Even the worst parts were easier because we faced them together." "Do you remember what you said to me on our 15th anniversary?" Vincent asked. "About how I healed more than just my wounds." "Of course I remember," Lila said. "It is still true, maybe even more true now than it was then." "The thing is," Vincent said slowly, "I could say the same to you. You healed more than just my shoulder that night, Lila. You healed the part of me that believed I would always be alone, that I was not worthy of real love or a real home. You healed the anger I carried from losing my parents, the bitterness of drifting without purpose. You gave me a reason to be more than just a hired hand moving from ranch to ranch. You gave me a future worth working toward and a present worth savoring." "We healed each other then," Lila said, understanding settling over her like a warm blanket. "That is what love does when it is real. It heals the broken places in both people. It makes us whole in ways we cannot be alone." They held each other in the darkness of their bedroom, in the house they had built on the land they had claimed, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had created together. Two people who had met by chance and had chosen each other every day since, through every challenge and triumph, every joy and sorrow. Vincent and Lila continued their life on the ranch, gradually transitioning more of the daily operations to James while remaining involved in the decisions and work. They watched their grandchildren grow, delighting in each new personality and milestone. They celebrated Margaret's successes as she built her medical practice, treating patients who would never have been seen by a woman doctor a generation earlier. They grew old together, as they had always planned. Vincent's hair turned silver, and Lila's face showed the lines of decades of smiling and squinting in the California sun. But their love never dimmed, never faded, never became routine or taken for granted. On their 40th wedding anniversary, with their children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren gathered around them, Vincent stood to speak. His back was a bit bent now, and his hands showed the arthritis that came from decades of hard physical labor, but his voice was still strong. 40 years ago, he began, I got shot in a bar fight. It was one of the stupidest things that ever happened to me, getting involved in someone else's trouble, taking a bullet because I could not mind my own business. But it was also the best thing that ever happened to me because it led me to Lila. She patched me up that night, and in doing so, she changed my entire life. I was just a drifting cowboy with no real prospects and no real future. She was a doctor's assistant with skills far beyond what the world acknowledged. We should have been a poor match, a relationship that made no sense on paper. But somehow we fit. We worked. And 40 years later, I can say without hesitation that she is the best thing that ever happened to me. Every good thing in my life, from this ranch to our children to the man I have become, it all traces back to her, to loving her and being loved by her. There was not a dry eye in the room by the time he finished. Lila stood, moving to his side with the ease of 40 years of practice. And you, she said, her voice wavering with emotion, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. You gave me a life beyond anything I had imagined. You have loved me steadily and truly for 4 decades, and I am more in love with you today than I was the day we married. You healed more than just your wounds, Vincent. You healed my whole life. They kissed, to the cheers and applause of their family. 2 old people who had never stopped being young in each other's eyes, who had never stopped seeing the wounded cowboy and the skilled assistant who had found each other on a hot August night in 1882. Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 83, with Lila beside him as she had been for 58 years of marriage. The cause was simply age, the wearing out of a body that had worked hard and loved well for 8 decades. The whole county turned out for his funeral, a testament to the respect and affection he had earned through a lifetime of honorable dealing and kind treatment of everyone he met. Lila grieved deeply, but without bitterness. She had known, as they both had, that their time together could not last forever, but they had made the most of every day they had been given. They had built a life of substance and meaning. They had raised children who were good people and contributed to the world. They had loved each other fully and without reservation, until death finally parted them. She lived another 5 years after Vincent's passing, staying on the ranch that they had built together, surrounded by family and memories. She continued to see patients occasionally, though most of the work had been taken over by Margaret, whose medical degree allowed her to do things Lila had only dreamed of. In her final days, with her children gathered around her bed, Lila thought back to that night so many years ago. She could still see Vincent's face, pale with pain but determined, his eyes finding hers as though she were a lifeline in a storm. She could still feel the way her heart had responded to him even then, the connection that had been instant and inexplicable and absolutely real. "Tell me again," Margaret urged gently, holding her mother's aged hand. "About the night you met Father. Lila smiled, her voice weak but clear. "He was brought in with a bullet wound," she began, the story she had told countless times over the years, bleeding and in terrible pain. But even through all of that, he was brave and kind and a little bit charming. I helped Dr. Harrington patch him up, and from that moment my life was never the same. He healed more than just his wounds that night. He healed my whole life. "And he would say you healed his," Margaret said softly, tears streaming down her face. "We healed each other," Lila corrected, her eyes drifting closed. "That is what real love does. It heals all the broken places and makes two people whole." Those were her last words. She passed peacefully, with her children around her and Vincent's name on her lips, joining him in whatever came next. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their headstones simple but meaningful. Vincent's read, "Devoted husband, father, and rancher." He built a legacy of love. Lila's read, "Healer, wife, and mother. She made everyone around her better." And there they rested, together in death as they had been in life, two people who had found each other by chance and had built something extraordinary through choice. Their ranch continued through their children and grandchildren. Their love story told and retold as an example of what was possible when two people committed fully to each other and to building a life together. In the end, the cowboy and the doctor's assistant had created more than just a ranch or a family. They had created a testament to the power of love, the importance of believing in each other, and the extraordinary things that can grow from the simplest beginnings. A bullet wound, a bar fight, and two brave hearts willing to take a chance on something uncertain had led to 58 years of marriage, 4 children, dozens of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and a legacy that would endure for generations. It had all started with a wounded cowboy and a skilled assistant, and it had become something beautiful and lasting, proof that sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most meaningful lives.